So joining me on the channel for this imminent incoming takeover, it's the excellent Ahmed Shooble from The Athletic. And he's tweeted recently about the Bill Foley AFC Bournemouth intro. We'll get into that very, very soon. But Ahmed, great to see you. Always love having you on the channel. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, busy couple of days, or I guess couple of weeks, and we should see a couple more busy weeks to come as well as this takeover gets over the line and finalized.
As always, Ahmed Shooble's details are in the description below. I'll put some links to his Twitter posts as well. Make sure you check them out and also head over to The Athletic and read his stuff. All right, because he's absolutely fantastic for the Bournemouth fans. And this is about the incoming takeover. But first, Ahmed, we need to talk about Bournemouth. Eighth in the Premier League, 9 points out of 15, unbeaten under Gary O'Neill. Not too bad, is it?
Who'd have thunk it, eh? Pretty quality. I think the game coming up obviously is the Fulham game. Bournemouth and Fulham both eighth and ninth in the table. Can you believe? That's a surprise. I don't think many people saw coming. So yeah, no, I'm obviously very happy that Bournemouth are in the situation because it means I don't, from a selfish point of view, I don't have to keep writing sort of depressing articles about what Bournemouth could be doing better and how the play isn't quite matching up and maybe quality is needed after all the rest of it. I think the players have given a very good account of themselves, have woken up the general Premier League fan to how good this team actually is, and yeah, long may it continue.
And you know what? Who would have thought that a balanced centre back partnership of Senesi and Mepham, a left footed and a right footed? I have to bring it in, Ahmed. It's just for the team, really, just to wind them up. But they're playing well at the moment, them two at centre back. It's quite balanced and quite nice.
Yeah, it is. Balance is definitely the key word there. There's balance all over the pitch,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of. I touched on this in one of the. I think the piece I wrote after the Brentford game, where it looked like maybe Gary O'Neill was perhaps leaning a bit too much into his play's flexibility, and that balance wasn't being struck. We saw. I mean, it took quite a while to get going, but we saw in the game against Leicester how balanced this team is, particularly in that effect you touched upon. Senesi coming in after a difficult start in those earlier games where the fixtures were quite rough. And now with Lloyd Kelly out, it's you kind of have to like remind yourself, oh my God, like the captain isn't here, Lloyd Kelly isn't here. One man of the match in the last game. I think it's his second man of the match after the Brentford game as well, right?
Yeah.
Two consecutive man of the match awards in place of the captain. That's as solid and balanced as you can get, to be honest.
Absolutely fantastic. But we're going to be moving on to talking about this incoming Bill Foley takeover and that intro that Ahmed's put together. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise, really, Ahmed, that this takeover's come about. It's been no secret of Max's that he's been looking to offload the club, but I've been reassured that he hasn't rushed it. He's waited for the right moment. It seems that he's done his own due diligence and the club have waited for the right person to come in. I'm feeling positive about that. But Bill Foley, someone whose net worth is, I think, 1.2 billion. I think in 2016, he was awarded with the Black Knight Sports, if I've got that right, the Black Knight Sports, a hockey franchise with the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think they also took over in 2021 an indoor football league team. So this is someone that's trying to get into this ownership of sports and a franchise that we don't quite understand, all of us in the UK, but it's got to be exciting times for Bournemouth.
Yeah, very exciting times. Bill Foley, from everything I've learned about him, I've spoken to a couple of Las Vegas-based sports journalists as well, ones that cover his hockey team over there, and everything I've heard about him. He strikes me as a very ambitious owner, someone who's not just, he's obviously there to have fun. He's got a very fun side to him, and I guess we'll come on to that a bit later. But he's very sort of he's fiercely driven by growth and what you can do to grow a franchise, a team, a business in general. So to give you a bit of background, the Las Vegas Golden Knights were what is called an expansion team, and that essentially means they came from nothing. They have no history. A team. It was the first major sports franchise in Las Vegas. So as big a city as Las Vegas or a bigger state or whatever you want to call it as Las Vegas is, they have never had a basketball team. They've never had an American football team, and a lot of that had to do with the reputation of the gambling of the town. But he basically went on uncharted territory, and rather than see it as a deterrent, Foley saw it as a big business opportunity, and he essentially put out a lot of season ticket drives, essentially just persuading fans or sports fans in the area to say, well, look, if we make this hockey team a reality, can we guarantee that you will, buy a season ticket? And essentially, he had to do that, and he got a couple of his investors in, and they managed to, sell out before the club had even begun, which is remarkable. And since then, they've been very successful. One of the most successful expansion franchises in North American sports history. Like, imagine coming from nothing and then challenging for cups. They have the Stanley Cup over there, which is what they play in the playoffs towards the end of the season. But yeah, so that's sort of not sort of, it's actually very remarkable the way he's been able to do that. The hunger to create a team and now off the back of his success with the Golden Knights in Las Vegas, you have the NBA, the Basketball Association in America, looking to found or move a basketball team to Las Vegas. You're getting quite a few movements from Major League Soccer. So other sports are kind of looking at what Foley's done there and be like, oh, I want a piece of that. So he's definitely a man who knows where expansion lies, or where the opportunity for growth is within a sports franchise, whatever kind of business he's running. And it seems as though he's identified that with Bournemouth as well.
And it looks like he's going to waste no time once it's all signed, sealed and delivered. Let's look at your in trade then, Ahmed. I'm going to go straight to the first one. You'll see it on Twitter if you follow Ahmed, and it talks about finishing the training complex. Now, it was a project that Bournemouth were very keen on doing before the COVID pandemic. Once we got promotion back to the Premier League this season, the club were opening, coming out and saying it was going to be their priority. Players were fans were thinking, was it going to be signing players? But no, we're going to do something with that training ground. We're going to make a start on it. They were going to put an Astro pitch down there, I think a dome over there as well, and some temporary offices. And it looks like, Ahmed, from what I'm seeing, that Bill Foley's going to continue that and make sure that is the number one thing that gets done instantly.
Instantly is probably not the word that I'd use, but it definitely is, in terms of the short-term goals, is definitely at the top of his priority list. I think it's something that, I guess, Foley coming into, it's something that was already been underway from before he came to the club. So it's something that he kind of just wants to get out of the way, and get done properly, and then move forward in that regard. Because the academy is a particularly tricky knot to untie, because once you do untie that, there's a whole heap of I guess consequences that come off the back of that. So the under-21s don't currently play in a competitive league, and I guess the addition of an indoor artificial pitch in that academy, it would be one of those things that takes Bournemouth's academy status from Category 3 to Category 2, which would actually put them in a competitive league and would put the under-21s in a better competitive standing. So when they make that step up to the first team, they're not as sort of a deer in headlights as they might be in the current setup. Saying that, though, Jaden Anthony and John Zamora seem to have come through relatively unscathed. But yeah, no, it's about, like, so for example, the Ajani Birchalls, obviously he left for Aston Villa, a very promising youngster, and the idea is that he left because the academy facilities that Aston Villa were offering were much better than what Bournemouth could. And to stop that from happening in the future, because Bournemouth does have quite a big catchment area, larger than most other clubs, to take advantage of. The idea is in the short term to stop that from happening, and it would also be an opportunity to get the academy teams and the first team under the same roof. With regards to the timeline, the artificial pitch is the closest to being completed. There are other surrounding facilities like offices and stuff to be done as well, but that artificial pitch is close to being completed. It's expected to be completed, I'd say, in the next week or so. And the club's plan is to get the first team training in there within the next 18 months, and then move the academy sides in there from the 6 to 8 months after that.
I know there's always been discussions between the fans about whether it's stadium, whether it's training ground. Look, it might be both now, but initially we were talking about what's more important. And the training ground was always really important to me. I think it provides a long-term future for the club, like you're talking about players. I mean, I know for a fact we've lost players, youth players, to Southampton because of their academy and how good that is. And that's what we need to stop now, because the financial sort of what we can get back from it later on, if we do end up selling on players, that could grow the club in time. It's interesting what you say as well about the squad. I mean, I don't know many clubs, and I'm sure there's none in the Premier League, where their training grounds adjacent to the stadium. I mean, as we like at AFC Bournemouth, we're unique. Really, they need that privacy to get down to work Monday to Friday, and that's for me really important, that the club, the academy, and the first team have some base to work from before that Saturday fixture.
I think that's very, very important. That it just the whole togetherness that sort of that brings to the club. It was one of the many consequences I alluded to earlier of the importance of getting that sort of done. Yeah, so the intention is definitely there to wrap that up and then press on with the stadium situation. What happens beyond this season should they survive, and yeah, I guess it just signals Foley's ambitious sort of intent to get the club on the right track immediately.
So for those that are looking for that training ground, good news. We're going to continue by the sounds of it. Now, the next thing is manager. I mean, this is an important part for AFC Bournemouth, especially trying to stay in the Premier League. I've said recently, Ahmed, that it looks like the decision to change that management status was the right thing to do. We're unbeaten since that result at Anfield. Gary O'Neill's doing a good job. I've recently tweeted that although he's doing a good job, I would stay as you are. I think it's a nice blend between O'Neill, Elphick, Cooper. I think they all bring something different. I get to the World Cup. We're picking up points. If we can pick up some more, that would be fantastic. But I think it's a bit too soon for Gary O'Neill. I don't want to lose Gary O'Neill, but, we've seen it before, haven't we, Ahmed, where you get this bounce. Maybe the training's changed a bit. The atmosphere is different. But once that 3-year contract lands as in permanent manager, for some reason, sometimes it just changes in football, and I worry about that and his lack of real experience as a manager.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that I think is probably standing in his way of being not considered, but I guess probably a shoe-in at this point. He is still new in terms of the whole managerial. He's 39 years old, which is remarkably young for as far as football managers go. But it's Gary O'Neill's made no secret that as soon as he hung up his boots and began his coaching career, that he always wanted to be a head coach at some club. And now he's finally got that opportunity, albeit on an interim basis at Bournemouth. Yeah, I think it probably may be a bit too soon, but he has done a phenomenal job. His task, as far as the club are concerned, was always to steady the ship up until around the World Cup time, where essentially putting the club in the best position they could be in to attack that January window. Hire potentially a new manager in that sort of break while the World Cup is happening. For the manager to implement the style, and then they can go again for the second half of the season. It's a very odd one, given the circumstances of the fixture calendar and all the rest of it. But it's obvious. I don't think I mentioned this in the intro piece, but Gary O'Neill was subject to interest from Huddersfield and Middlesbrough, who recently were both looking for managers. And obviously West Brom need a manager now. I think Championship clubs and clubs in general have gotten the gist that he's here for the interim basis, and I don't think anything's going to take away from that. He's done such a good job. I don't think he'd be taking a step down. Not to say that he's a Premier League proof manager at this point, but yeah, the job that he's doing suggests that he probably won't be moving down anytime soon. So yeah, the interest from the outside is definitely there. However, I don't want to make a sort of a sweeping prediction, but I don't see him being appointed, no matter how well he does. I just think it's a thing where the club would prefer to make an external appointment. They have their short list, which Foley is constantly being kept abreast of, and they're constantly tweaking that list. And Roberto De Zerbi, who is now Brighton's manager, was on that list. So I guess that also shows that the club isn't looking at the quote unquote usual suspects. Your Allardyces, your Steve Bruce, who's obviously now joined that that sort of that circle. So it's it shows that the club has ambitions of appointing a manager that isn't necessarily Premier League proven, but does have the pedigree of or the history of attacking free flowing football like De Zerbi does. So yeah, I think if the club go for an external appointment, I'd have to think that Gary O'Neill probably goes elsewhere, because you have to remember he came from Liverpool's under-23s. He was on a set pathway in a similar way to what Steven Gerrard is now, to where he was going to earn his stripes at Liverpool in the academy sides, and then to get that big break elsewhere, away from the limelight, so to speak, and then probably come back to the Premier League. He was on that sort of set pathway. He deserted all of that to come to Bournemouth with Jonathan Woodgate. did fantastically with him in the sort of the interim basis that Woodgate was to get the team back up to the playoffs, into the semi-finals, and has stayed on ever since. And everyone at the club, absolutely loves him, and you can see that in the way the players are working their socks off for him. So yeah, he's done a lot, but I think he was on his own path before he came to Bournemouth, and I think if he doesn't get that head coach role at Bournemouth, he'll probably be on his way. And more power to him. I think he's shown that he can do a lot with. I don't want to say not very much, but he's shown that he can turn a team that got 9-0 to Liverpool, 4-0 to Manchester City, 3-0 to Arsenal, and now it's 2 comeback wins and 3 draws. That doesn't happen overnight, but he's made it seem like that, and I think that shows how good of a manager he can be.
Bill Foley is in form, though, as you said, and that is a worry for me, because I'm sitting here thinking I don't think I want Gary O'Neill as main manager, but I want him in the team. I want him in the club. I think he brings a lot. He's shown that, but there's just that worry that if he gets a 3-year deal, things change, and it's weird how it happens in football. The pressure, I don't know if it's pressure, but stuff changes. We've seen it time and time again, and that's the concern I have. But we'll have to watch this space, I suppose, Ahmed. Back into your intro then, and we talk about the January transfer window, and we talked about the manager situation, and surely they're going to want to know who's coming in and who's going to get hold of that January transfer window. Yes, we've got a recruitment team, but we're going to need to get the right players that are going to take this squad even further. I think this squad lacks a little bit of pace in transitioning in the counter. I think there is a player in the squad actually in Sariki that could offer that, but is he Premier League quality? We don't really know. But what we don't want to do is buy too many players, because that's not always the answer. We've seen that in the Premier League. But it's getting that manager in position, whether it is Gary O'Neill or someone else, to then hit that January transfer window, and maybe Bill Foley will look to just strengthen just to guarantee that safety.
Yeah, I think you touched on it there. The approach is a very unique one. Unique is a kind of a buzzword for this situation, but it's a bit difficult. I know that once this takeover is finally completed, in terms of it going to the Premier League owners and directors test, which could take any number of weeks, but they're expecting it to be done by the end of the month, I'd say. The intention on the club's part is to appoint a manager in and around that time for it to coincide, which would mean that the manager would be in, or whoever the new manager is would be in situ when that transfer window rolls around. And so he would already have a couple of weeks under his belt with the squad, knowing what the weaknesses are. But you're right. I think that there is probably a gap in the squad for a real sort of ball carrying live wire. We kind of saw what Siriki Dembele was last season at times, but probably a more Premier League proven one. There were a couple of names which I dropped into the piece: Antoine Semenyo from Bristol City, Noah Lang from Club Brugge, Christian Kouame from Fiorentina, all quite like sexy names in the football world, if I can say that. But it's one that the club are very much being kept abreast of, because it's a situation where they would like to attack the January window in a way that they weren't able to attack. It's difficult when an owner is trying to set a club and he still puts in money for a Marcus Tavernier, and he still puts in money for a Marcos Senesi, and those are very shrewd signings. And the club obviously want to keep that sort of that shrewdness in the market going, even though January is a notoriously difficult market in the middle of the season. You don't really get the best players, because what player of quality is going to want to leave their club in the middle of the season, transition to a new league? Whoever arrives is probably not going to make an immediate impact or whatever. But it's definitely a tricky situation. But I think it's one Bournemouth have planned for. I think this was the idea from the summer. They always knew that this January window was the takeover would be done by then, and they would have money in the bank ready. And I think there are a couple of players, more than a couple of players that they've had their eye on. The ones I listed earlier were names that the clubs were interested in towards the very back end of the summer window. So it was with a view of reigniting that interest in January, just to say, hey, remember us, sort of thing. So yeah, how successful Bournemouth will be in attaining those players or any other is unclear. But yeah, they do realize that there is a need for an attacking player in the mold you mentioned, someone who can carry the ball in transition, and probably one or two defenders as well. But yeah, no, it should be quite an exciting. Probably not as exciting as the deadline day we had under Parker, where there was 5 different signings in like 4 hours or something like that in the last stages of the window. But yeah, an eventful January, I expect for sure.
Some exciting words in those comments, and I like the word live wire. I like that, live wire.
Mhm.
Someone who can take us up the pitch, get us off our seat. One thing we have to be aware of, though, Ahmed, is that when this happens and goes through, and Bill Foley shows his worth, does that make the challenge harder trying to get these players in for a good value? Because what you can credit the club at times is we have got players at very good rates. And as you've seen before with Newcastle, the rates then double and treble because they look at who you are and your ownership. And well, you've just gone and spent 120 million on buying a football club. Well, you can pay double for a player. And that's going to be another challenge that's going to enter our recruitment team in January potentially.
Yeah, for sure. I think the club are fully aware of that. Whenever a new rich kid on the block, so to say, I don't think Bournemouth are quite there yet in terms of
No.
the kind of money that Man City and Newcastle have. But no, a takeover, an ambitious owner. For a selling club that they're almost licking their lips. So, we can probably offload a certain couple of players that we don't need here, sort of thing. But no, the club are very much aware of that. The club know how to conduct good business. Every club has had their fair share of, I don't want to call them howlers. I think that's a bit unfair, but like they've had their fair share of questionable transfers in terms of the amounts paid or whatever. But Bournemouth are no strangers. Even when the club are up for sale, they know how to squeeze value in the Marcus Taverniers and the Marcos Senesis, as I mentioned earlier. And the idea is that they'll continue to do the same. They won't be deterred by any perceived reputation of them being new money, so to speak. So they're not looking to be taken advantage of in this window. And I think they'll continue to find value wherever it is.
You also talked about being less reliant on Premier League TV money. Talk to us about that from people that don't really understand the financial side of the game. What are we talking about in that statement?
So the best way to look at a way that a football club makes money is split into, I think, 3 main avenues of revenue. So there's match day income, which is tickets. There's commercial income, which is like sponsorships and stuff like that. And then there's transfer fees, which is obviously the money you get from transfers, right? Obviously, there's broadcast money as well, which is the money you get from being on television. So the money that Bournemouth got, because Bournemouth aren't the most commercially savvy club, they're quite a small club in that regard. They don't boast the same amounts as your Manchester United, even your Leicesters and sort of the mid-table sides in the Premier League. They're some way off in that regard. In terms of match day tickets, they don't really make much money either because the ground is the smallest in the Premier League. And in terms of transfers, that's been a big sort of safety blanket for them. We saw in the season that Bournemouth were relegated, selling Callum Wilson, Nathan Ake, Aaron Ramsdale for, I think, a combined 80, 90 million pounds. That basically saved them, especially during the pandemic. That saved the club, literally. And Maxim Demin's is his sort of, his way of running the club was to invest in liquid assets, I guess, assets that can be moved on quicker. Like for example, you can buy a player, for example, like an Aaron Ramsdale or an Nathan Ake, and if the club need money, you can sell that player and get that money quickly. But if you were to invest in the stadium or if you were to invest in the training complex, and the club needs money, the money is all tied up in that development, and it's a bit difficult to extract money in a way that you could do with the player transfer. So that was Max's way of dealing with the club. The idea is that Bill Foley can do both on the pitch and off the pitch improvements because he's just got such vast resources. So back to the Premier League money thing, it's an interesting one because Bournemouth, because they haven't got many other streams of revenue when they got to the Premier League, and because they benefited from finishing higher up than in some seasons. The higher up you finish in the table, the more money that you get. I think it's like a £2 million difference each position. So Bournemouth were in a situation where I think like 80 to 90% of all the money they made in that whole year was just Premier League TV money. And that's a remarkably vulnerable place to be, because as soon as that Premier League money goes, you're in a situation where things become unsustainable. You either have to sell a whole load of players or sell a couple of players for really high prices, which they were able to do in 2020 at the end of the 2019-20 season. And it just kind of like, it's almost like it's one step forward, 2 steps back in that regard. There's not really much progression. It's kind of like Groundhog Day, and you're just hoping and praying everything goes in your way to stay in the Premier League. And that leaves you quite vulnerable, because then the money that you have or the money that you make is also tied up in the wages. So I think it was a situation where, so for the Bournemouth 6-year Premier League stay, I think it started the amount of money that they earned compared to their wages was, I think, was, it started at 56%, which is a healthy amount, and then it rose year on year 70%, 80%, and then it to the last account, which was 1920, after that season, their final season before this one in the Premier League, it got to like 113%. So that obviously that was during the pandemic, so there was some money lost, and that's a big asterisk there. But that essentially means that for every £1 they made in any, just £1 they Bournemouth made in that year, £1.13 was being put into wages. So it essentially means you're losing money. And obviously, pretty much every club lost money that season, because it was the half of the season was delayed and all the rest of it. But yeah, that puts Bournemouth in a very, very tricky situation, because they're very reliant on that Premier League money, and they need other forms of income. And the way that Foley seeks to, I guess, bridge that gap is through sponsorships. Now, at his hockey team, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, they have a sponsor for, they have what's called tier sponsorships. So they're tiered in the sense that they've got, so for example, for alcohol, they've got a gin sponsor, they've got a cider sponsor, they've got a vodka sponsor, they've got a beer sponsor, they've got Foley's own wine company, Foley Family Wines, is the wine sponsor. So yeah, they've got a lot of commercial appeal. Foley's restaurants are also sponsored by the club, and from what I'm hearing, there is a hope that that sort of structure can be put in place at Bournemouth, to where they're not so reliant on the money they just make on a match day in terms of the football on the pitch. They're sort of almost like a brand, a national brand, to where folks traveling in from all over the world can come to Bournemouth and expect a certain level of quality to go with the whole match day experience. And it's just about buying into that, making Bournemouth more of a brand as opposed to just a club, that I think that Foley wants to tap into, because Bournemouth, it isn't as perhaps a marketable a city as it could be. I think, given the fact that people who are in the UK know Bournemouth is a nice place to go, but people outside the UK don't really know that. And I think Foley is trying to, I guess, change that by sort of creating that national, I guess, international sort of fanfare, and tapping into them being a Premier League club now. Obviously, Premier League is the biggest league in the world. So it's just about marrying up all those things, connecting all those dots, and bridging that gap to where Bournemouth aren't so reliant on that Premier League money. It's just adding on to that, and then that in turn allows them to have more money to invest in the future, for if it's a new stadium, or if they're buying a stadium back from Structure Dean. It's all about expanding the club in a way that I think Maxim Demin probably couldn't. But more power to Maxim, as obviously he's done such a tremendous job in getting the club to where they are now. But it's all about moving forward. I think that's the biggest theme of what is set to be the Foley era for Bournemouth.
Not an easy task running a football club. I'm glad all I have to worry about on YouTube is predicting who will play on Saturday. Lots of work for Bill Foley to do there. But you've spoken about it now. We can't ignore the football stadium. Dean Court, 11,000 seater stadium. Look, we love it. It's different. It's unique. Even away fans love being so close to the pitch. But there are frustrations within the fan base for years now that not enough fans can get through the doors. There are fans that have been following for Bournemouth for years and years and years, but missed out on the last few seasons. They're not part of the point system now. But, Ahmed, I do understand both scenarios here. I would love to get another 4, 5, 6,000 fans through the door, but I understand from the club's point of view that you don't just build a stadium for 1, 2 years in the Premier League. You've got to build a stadium that's going to last. Now, if you go and build an 18, 19,000 seater stadium and in 10 years' time you fall down the leagues and it's soulless, they've not achieved anything and probably in debt. We want to get more fans through the door. I'm sure Bill Foley's going to either going to buy the stadium, expand the stadium, or build a new stadium. But the fans have also got to play their part, because we need to fill that stadium week in, week out, Championship, Premier League, because that's the only way it's going to work, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's true. You make a good point about the ground, Dean Court probably not being as big as the supporter base is, in the sense that there could be a lot more in there. It isn't necessarily, from the club I'm getting, that it isn't necessarily a sellout in terms of the match day, but hospitality sells out all the time. They don't offer any more season tickets. So the opportunity for growth in terms of sheer numbers is obviously there. So yeah, that's definitely playing at the back of their mind. But in terms of whether or not they build their own stadium or whether they buy Dean Court back from the current owners, that's a situation which is, they're constantly considering, and I don't think they'll be coming to a decision for a few months at least, because there is a lot to unpack in that situation. It's a very, as I'm sure you'll probably know, it's a very, very sort of knotty situation with all sorts of different legal aspects to consider. So yeah, it's something that they're weighing up. But I guess it's interesting because I obviously, when I tweeted that out yesterday, there was a lot of mixed sort of reaction, because I posed it as two different options: obviously buying a stadium back or building your own. And there was quite a few mixed responses. A lot of people strongly saying no. I love Dean Court. It's been where I've been for however many years of supporting the club, but I think it would be best. You can't really eke much more out of it. It's already finicky in terms of the legal aspects of it. It's going to be very difficult to work around. How likely is it the structure deal want to sell? And other people saying, oh, with Foley here, it's we haven't had this much capital behind us for a long time, so Structured Dean can't really be choosy to who they sell, because what else are they going to do with it if Bournemouth if they don't want to they don't want to rent it? And that's the key. Under Foley, Bournemouth no longer want to be renters. They want to play in a stadium which they own. Whether that's Dean Court or another one remains to be seen. But I think, that's also something that they're looking to, I guess, get straight. And then after the training complex is completed, that's another thing on their sort of for their long-term consideration.
What I think is really positive with the fan base, Ahmed, is I walk around Bournemouth a lot now, going shopping, and I've never seen so many Bournemouth junior fans wearing Bournemouth shirts. I mean, if I go back 10 years ago, you'd see the odd Bournemouth shirt, but then you'd see other Premier League team football shirts on a 14-year-old kid in Tesco's. You go everywhere now. There's Bournemouth shirts everywhere. That's obviously what the Premier League first time round did, and it's continued. That is potential there. So building the new stadium, getting more fans through the door, with the junior fan base going up now, supporting home teams, the hometown, that will give a little bit of faith to the new ownership that this will work and it won't be an empty stadium at times.
Yeah, for sure. That whole global appeal is something they're definitely looking to tap into. And I guess the wider point is also, Bournemouth. When a club like Bournemouth has such a meteoric rise through the divisions, and then they don't really have much time to construct the club because everything's happening so fast. They literally go promotion off the back of promotion off the back of promotion, and it's a sort of thing where you finally get to the Premier League and it's all great and everything's wonderful, but then there is a big sort of appetite from the fans to have a tangible legacy, to remember these times, because I don't think Bournemouth fans don't really think of themselves long term, or most fans don't really think of themselves as a long term Premier League club. That might change under Foley, of course, and it probably will. Who knows? But that's definitely niggling in the back of a lot of Bournemouth fans' mind, in the sense that they need to have some sort of long-standing legacy. It can't just be about the brilliant football that Bournemouth played. It can't just be about the 4-3 against Liverpool. It can't just be about those memorable upsets against the big teams. It's got to be something tangible. You mentioned the younger Cherries, a lot of the younger Bournemouth fans coming through, and it's about them as well. It's about giving them, a home that befits their top flight status, or the top flight status they've enjoyed for the past 6, or I guess, for the 6 years that they've been there, I think including this one. So it's a tricky one, but I think Bournemouth and Foley and the directors are very much aware of the task that lays ahead of them. I think it's a bit of a sigh of relief now that they've got someone who wants to invest in that side of it. But yeah, no, I think it's definitely something that Bournemouth are very much looking forward to. I think the fans are as well.
Another balancing act there for Bill Foley on the stadium. Roots at Dean Court, but can he take Bournemouth to another level? Breaking into this last bit of the in-tray then, Ahmed, you're also talking about some sceptical fans. There are going to be fans look, we've seen Man United taken over by American ownership. We've seen Liverpool taken over by American ownership, I think. And look, I'm taking reassurance, Ahmed. We'll have to see what happens in the future. Only time will tell. But Max has always had Bournemouth at his heart. He's always done right by the club alongside Jeff Mostyn. And I'm taking reassurance that they wouldn't have allowed this deal to go through without those checks and reassurances that Bill Foley's going to have Bournemouth at the heart in the new way forward. And that's what I'm taking from it, thinking positively. And there will be fans out there that will be nervous, but that's only natural.
That's absolutely right in terms of Demin not willing to sell to an owner who doesn't have Bournemouth's best interest at heart. I think there is a big respect between the seller and buyer in this regard. They're very much on the same page, and I think that should definitely soothe some of the skeptical sentiment that some Bournemouth fans or even Premier League fans on a wider scale have towards Foley's, I guess, imminent takeover of the club. It's different to Manchester United because the way the Glazers took over was through a leverage buyout, and I'll spare you the boring financial details. But essentially puts the club in a lot of debt, right? They don't actually they take out a lot of money in dividends, no matter what happens during the pandemic, not during the pandemic. So the club are in a lot of debt, right? Billions of pounds of debt. The way Foley's taken over the club is obviously yet to be seen because it's still happening, it's still in the process. But that's not the case with Foley, right? He's not looking to put the club in debt. If anything, he's looking to grow the club beyond what Demin could have done, and I think that's the most important part. And yes, that may lead to potentially some ticket prices going up. But from what I understand, there is no appetite on Foley's part to change the culture of the club. There is no sort of indication that he'll come in and we'll start seeing all these different American food items like, fried chili dogs and all these calorific. Because one thing is that in the UK we have to show how much calories things are. So I think that would probably deter people if they end up doing that. But anyway, yeah, I don't think we're going to see a mass Americanization of Bournemouth as is being parodied, I think, on certain parts of social media, quite funnily, actually. We might see a couple of pre-game shows. We might see a few entertainment aspects to it, but I think that just feeds more into the profitability and the commerciality that Foley sees within Bournemouth. But yeah, and just in terms of changing the culture of the club, I don't think there's any, or just in terms of being like, because he is very hands-on with Las Vegas Golden Knights, but I think that's more because he comes from a hockey background himself, so he feels very much attached to the sport. And it's a club that he made as well. It's literally an expansion team that he made from the ground up. So to a certain extent, you kind of have to be very hands-on with that. And he lives in Las Vegas as well, lives in America. He's not going to live here. He's going to have a house here, Foley, but he's not going to live here. So there is a sense that he won't be as hands-on. But that's not to say he's not going to be as elusive a figure as Maxim Demin has been during his stewardship of the club. But no, I don't think fans are obviously well within their rights to be skeptical, but I think some of that skepticism in terms of just the blanket comparisons to other American owners and what they've done can be misguided. I think it would be wise for them to just sit tight and be patient, particularly the Bournemouth fans, because I think this is who it affects the most. Just to sit back and see what happens. But I don't suspect he'll be rooting up anything with regards to any sort of long-standing values that the club have. I think it's very much a thing of listening to what the town tells him. I think he's very. We've seen it on when he came to the Leicester game. He's very sort of with the people. He's not someone who is sort of shrouded in shadows and doesn't like being in and amongst it. He's definitely someone he's a sort of quite a warm character, someone who listens. And I think he might make a few mistakes. Who knows? Because no one's perfect. But at the same time, I think he should be given a chance because some of his plans are quite ambitious, and it's clear that he's got Bournemouth's best interest at heart.
I was thinking on Saturday, Ahmed, that after about 60 minutes, he might have been thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? And then the last 25, he's like, best decision of my life. Need to get this done. Premier League, hurry up. It'd be interesting. I don't think we'll ever see it. But can you imagine if they panned to a fan halfway through the game and then they had to like down a beer or something like that? Because you see it in like hockey and all that sort of thing. I'm sure it won't turn into that in time. Right. Great talking about the in trade. Go and check out Ahmed's stuff. I'll put the links below, his Twitter, The Athletic. And we need to finish this video, Ahmed, really talking about Jeff Mostyn and Max. Now, who would have thought we've gone from collecting money in buckets down at the Winter Gardens? I mean, who would sign a check that pretty much meant they would not get a return on it at the time. You know, that's what Jeff did. He made a decision to write a check to save the club, and Max comes in and backs the club, continues to back the club. And look, we don't see Max a lot, but he's there when we need him. And I mean, the last thoughts really do have to go to what Max, Jeff have done to take this club through the lower leagues to 5 years in the Premier League, 2 years in the Championship, back in the Premier League, and 8th now in the division. I mean, they've gone out probably in a really good time.
Yeah, no, I think you can't even begin to think about what the future looks like without considering all the hard work that they did, all the brilliant work that they did to get the club to where they are now. I think it's utterly remarkable. I make a small note at the end of the intro piece to say that, you know, Bournemouth's journey up to the Premier League is something out of a Hollywood movie. Like it's ridiculous. Like off the back of 2 separate occasions of liquidation, a once in a lifetime manager like Eddie Howe, homegrown from the area, played for the club, and then was kind of hoisted into the managerial position. From what I understand, I don't think it was something that he was too keen on, but took it in his stride, left for Burnley, came back, and it was just it's been non-stop from there. And I think, you know, the work that particularly Jeff Mostyn, I don't think he gets enough credit, you know, for the work that he's done, you know, being so brave in those situations, in the face of just non-existence, literally non-existence. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. They were literally a game away. Bournemouth were literally a game away. And through all of that, you know, when Max came along as well as owner, it's, yeah, you can't, it doesn't get much more fairy tale like than that. And I think, yeah, I think there'll probably be some sort of commemorative gesture the club will make. Definitely for Jeff. I don't know about Max, but yeah, I think Jeff will probably have some sort of ambassadorial role, which I think is only right. Like he's, I don't even want to use the word mascot because that limits his, but he is Mr. Bournemouth. Like
Yeah.
he epitomizes the club. He's there every game, and yeah, I just, yeah, I don't think the fans can thank him enough for what he's done. I think there'll probably be some sort of send off for him. But yeah, him Max as well. Like what he's done with the club is just remarkable, really. And I think club wouldn't be here without them, frankly.
Well said. And the media team at Bournemouth do a great job on the socials, on the channel, on the website. And I'm sure everything will be put in place to say thanks to Max, say thanks to Jeff, and look forward to this new era. Ahmed, always enjoy speaking to you. Thanks for coming on to Cherries Red Army, giving us your thoughts. I know you're a very busy man. I know you're going to go and find out if the deal's gone through yet. Might be a few more weeks, but great to speak to you.
Yeah, no worries. Anytime, man. Anytime. You know I love coming on here.
And of course, we want to get your thoughts below in the comments. Let us know what you think about Ahmed's intro, and also talk to us about Jeff. Talk to us about Max. Where were you when the club was on the verge of being liquidated, but saved and saved again, and then went through the divisions to the Premier League? A good moment to talk about Bill Foley. We'll find out very soon when the takeover goes through. And then it's just all about watching this space. But on this video, until the next one, from me and Ahmed, we'll see you soon. Up the cherries.